Be positive for what? Be negative for what? You know, there's always been a lot of talk going on, both in real life and on the internet, with regards to positivity and negativity in all its aspects and various forms, such as toxic positivity. That led me to think, why are we so hung up on these terms and notions? Myself included, of course. But think of it this way: if we strive to be, let's just say, positive, emphasis on the word be, which means basically to become, wouldn't that mean that right now, inherently speaking, you are attaching a negative connotation to your whole self, to your being, and therefore, there is no positivity to search for because, inherently speaking, you are attaching negativity to yourself. So, how can you be positive when you are already considering yourself to be less than and therefore negative? Maybe I'm not making too much sense. So, let me just put it this way. So, if I'm in a negative state and I want to become positive, that means I am inherently at odds with myself. Therefore, inherently at odds with the positivity that I may harbor within myself, right? So even when I become positive, quote unquote, there will always be that nagging feeling that tells me that is something is wrong. So again, I ask, why all of this? Why is everybody so preoccupied with these things? I can say that there's always a financial incentive, especially for those who are on YouTube, to post about negativity, to talk about negativity. And I am sure you've seen the videos. I'm sure you've seen all of those AI slop videos that people just keep churning out. Why by this age and therefore I am a loser and I haven't figured it out yet and I'm depressed, I got no friends, I am done with family, I am done with friends, and all of that stuff. And then you can also take a look at the number of views that those kind of videos usually tend to make. And when you put two and two together, it's not so hard to understand that, well, negativity always sells. And people always want to hear a good train wreck story, let's just say. And then when we reach the topic of positivity, there's also this cliche type of video that seems to be passing around all the time. So it's usually the same old talk and rhetoric about self help, self actualization, self insert, whatever clever word you want. So these usually will put people at odds with themselves, in my opinion, rather than help them. If there's any help involved, it's just temporary, and then they're gonna revert back to the old ways. I say it because I've lived it, still living it. It's an ongoing process. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you that I'm beyond the things that I'm talking about here. Absolutely not. Which is also why, mainly, you will see people who seemingly have everything but are not happy or positive. I'd say let's not pretend either way. If you're feeling down, feel down. If you're feeling great, then feel it. But either way, know that nothing is gonna last. Even when you feel like you're on top of the world, there's still the fear of losing that sensation, of losing your possessions that make you feel great, right? So there's always that fear. And when there is that fear, there is negativity. So I'm still asking, why even bother with these things? If these emotions and sensations come, well, let them in, let them come. Do not try to oppose them or suppress them, positive or negative. But also, I would say host these feelings, host these emotions in a way that allows them to leave whenever they please, right? So that means that basically do not attach yourself to any of it, whether positive or negative, because as you have seen, I am sure you've experienced it. There are the highs. That's why they call them the highs, and that's why they call them the lows, right? After the high, there's a low. After the low, there is a high. So that just goes to show you that there is nothing that's going to last. So why attach yourselves to it in such a manner that whenever something changes, you're going to feel upset about it? Or whenever people change, you're going to feel upset why they've changed. Or it could be basically extrapolated on and on onto different contexts and different situations. Okay. Another thing I wanted to touch on is this whole comparison and results oriented culture that we have so strongly and lovingly cultivated over the past few years. This is also a real cause for people to develop all sorts of mental health issues, problems with self esteem, self image, when you feel that you're less than, and so on and so forth. Just look at our society now, especially prevalent in big cities where everybody has to perform somehow and compete with one another to prove that they deserve the things that they've amassed, and the others that couldn't, for whatever reason, will be labeled as losers, undesirables, good for nothing pieces of crap, let's just say. This is the environment that we live in, basically. Of course, there is something to be said about striving for a better condition, being ambitious, and also healthy competition and friction. Because without competition, without resistance, there can be no growth. Without that tiny amount of comparison that you make, there can be no growth. You know, it can be in whatever field you can think about. It can be art, it can be science, whatever field you can think about. There's always that comparison, that initial comparison, and the competition that follows that leads people to come up with better ideas, newer ways, more efficient ways to tackle and deal with different problems that life puts in our way. So that's always great. But when we look at our modern society, what we observe normally, usually I would say, is this insurmountable odd of endless competition. Not only with yourself, because, you're your number one adversary, in my opinion. We all are. We are the ones who, with our, you know, mindsets, with our thoughts, more often than not, we get in our own way. But, okay, let's put that aside for now. So, back to the point. I said there's this insurmountable odd of endless competition, not only with you, not only with the ones in your vicinity, but now, because of globalization, you're also in competition with others from around the globe. Of course, this is especially true in the case of jobs that can be remotely taken care of, right? So there is no healthy amount of resistance, there's just resistance. And then we wonder why people feel lost, people feel lonely and depressed, because they are facing these odds, especially if they live in big cities. There's always this claustrophobic feeling of endless competition and endless friction. And of course, they're going to turn to escapes from their own lives, from their own conditions, right? They're going to turn to those escapes. Now, what are those escapes? It can be anything from video games to, you know what, to addictions and drugs, and, you know, I'm not going to name all of it here on YouTube. I know there's like a limited type of thing that you can talk about. But, anyways, so again, we're gonna fall back on the same stay positive rhetoric, right? After all of that negativity. So, there will be people who are going to be searching for this positive message. So, they're going to fall back on the quote unquote stay positive rhetoric, which will do more harm than good, especially to those who have become very sensitive due to their less than ideal circumstances. So, if there's one thing that I've learned throughout my years on planet Earth, is that there is no one size fits all solution to our problems, especially the ones that are to do with our psyche and internal matters. So, what to do at the end of it all? I guess there's no real answer here. All I can think of at the time of recording this video is pay no heed to either the positive or the negative. It may sound counterintuitive, I know. Let me try to explain, I guess. Because let's say if you're being positive, right? If you're trying to be positive at all times, then you're going to be suppressing a part of yourself that may be right in some form or fashion. It may have a more realistic take on things. But now, because you're so committed to doing what's right and quote unquote positive, that you will eventually cause that part of you to be deemed as negative and therefore suppressed and buried under tons and tons of make believe and pretense. Same goes for negativity. If you've given too much to negativity in your life, then you would lose sight of the things that you may actually have that are decent and therefore positive. But now, because you're so committed to the cause of negativity, those things won't get a chance to show themselves. And now you're basically stuck in a loop, thinking that you're this way or that way, whereas in reality, you have something that is pretty good, but you're just not able to see it. Okay, so all of this to say that if you're in somewhat decent spot, if you're in a decent enough spot, I know the things that I talked about today is not gonna, of course, be the end all be all for people to, feel good about themselves or anything, right? So, of course, I'm gonna have to caveat it by saying that. But if you think that you're in a somewhat decent spot in your life and you have the basics covered, okay, just give a long, hard look at yourself and see what it is that you actually have or lack, okay? Both are equally as important, but at the end of the day, I would say they are neutral. There's no positive in the things that you have, same as there's no negative for the things that you lack and don't have, right? You will only do the needful accordingly, right? Without having to rationalize or explain or label or give context to any of the things that you see as positive or negative, You just do the needful when the need arises and then try to stay away from explanations as much as possible. Okay? Because you will have to force yourself to feel a certain way about things, which may not be true. You know? You may have something, you may have money, and you may deem it as positive, Whereas having a lot of money can also be a negative. You may also feel really worried about the amount of money that you have, right? So, again, do not try to explain these kind of things to yourself, okay? It's good to have them, it's good to feel these things. It's okay. But there's always a balance to be had. You cannot always be riding the highs and then falling down to the lows, right? Because in this case, then life is just going to turn to hell because you're always just riding the waves, which is not great. You're going to pass out eventually because of all the energy exertion, right? And if I wanted to talk about myself here a little bit, whenever I am up in my feelings, whenever I am tangled in emotions, and like I said, riding the highs and you know going through the lows, I feel like that I have no energy left. So my point is, why do we have to care so much about these things, right? Just let them come in, let them go. Do what's needful, do what's necessary, be efficient. It's okay. Save up some energy for the things that you actually care about, right? In this day and age, like I said before in my videos, I guess the powers that be really don't want us to put our efforts, put our energy towards the things that actually matter to us. They really don't want it. They want us to just feel upset or feel very happy. Because if you feel happy, if you feel good, then you can also be exploited. Same as feeling down and feeling negative. So if you're just basically buying into this whole emotions and feelings thing, then you can be very easily manipulated and exploited by others. I'm not just talking about governments, but your friends. Your friends may be able to exploit you because, well, they said something, and now because you basically feel a certain way, now you may do something that may not be true to you. So we're all hung up on these things, and they're not going to let us live properly and according to our nature. And again, this will lead to a lot of anger and frustration in the end. So I'd say let's just let go of both of these things. Let go of negativity and positivity. Let them come, let them go. That's it. And when the need arises, you do the needful and you do not get bogged down by labels or explanations or comparisons that you may make in the process. Okay, just bear in mind that there is a lot of people who are banking on our propensity for both positivity and negativity, like I said. And while they're laughing all the way to the bank, you and I are hung up on these things that will only serve to confuse us and drain us of our energy. That way, we won't have the capacity to do right by ourselves or the ones that we hold dear. So, say no to positivity and negativity. Say no to both, okay? And stay true to you, okay? I'll see you in the next one.